Hello and welcome to Stolen From Me. I'm Lindsay and viewer discretion is advised with all of my episodes. This week's case we are looking into is 24-year-old Alice Ruggles. Alice was born on the 24th of December 1991. She grew up with three other siblings in Leicestershire. Her parents Sue and Clive described Alice as the fun-loving one. Alice could make friends with anyone she came into contact with. Her kind and outgoing personality instantly attracted people towards her. With an excellent sense of humour, albeit somewhat mischievous, Alice had the ability to adapt to any conversation. With a smile on her face, she was able to put anyone at ease in her company. As a child, Alice was brave, happy, and lively. From a young age, Alice had great empathy for people and would always crack a joke or try and cheer them up in some way. The Ruggles family Christmas was a 3-day affair. No one ever missed one. And even when the children grew up and left home, Alice would insist that they got together and have this enormous Chinese meal. Having discovered fencing at the PGL camp at the age of 11, the sport soon became a big part of Alice's life. She represented her home county in Leicestershire and East Midlands region on many occasions. She also enjoyed success of the national fencing circuit. By the time Alice was 18, Alice had selected a university based on the strengths of their fencing club. Alice had decided Northumbrian University was the university for her. She became club captain. Alice's proudest achievement was winning the Women's Epee at Leeds Open in 2012. After graduating uni, Alice went on to work for the media company Sky in Newcastle. She would start by answering the phones, but was soon moved on to become site coordinator. With her ability to make people feel comfortable, this job was suited perfectly for Alice. Maxine, Alice's work colleague, said Alice was always the first up to demonstrate anything at work. And one time a man came in with a football. Alice stood up, walked to the front and volunteered. She balanced the football on the back of her neck and then laid down and did a press-up without knocking the football off the back. Maxine said Alice was always the life and soul of the party. Alice's parents and siblings would always keep in regular contact via WhatsApp. This is a free messaging app. Sue and Clive created such a loving family home that even if they couldn't be together in person, they would always be together through WhatsApp. Alice's best friend Jen had booked a trip to Sri Lanka with her boyfriend, but before the trip even happened, Jen sadly broke up with her boyfriend. This was at the same time Alice had split up from hers. So Jen said to Alice, "Why not join me on this trip to Sri Lanka and we can make it a girly holiday?" Jen describes her friendship with Alice as the most fulfilling friendship she's ever had, stating, "Most friendships are one-sided, but not Alice." She said Alice put the same effort into Jen as Jen did to her. This is how they became best friends. On the plane, a rather excited Jen and Alice was getting ready to enjoy their holiday, and they were documenting every part of it to make their memories. Jen took a photo of them both pulling funny faces on the plane and posted it to her social media. Not long afterwards, a notification popped up on Jen's phone. Trimon Dillon likes your post. Trimon goes by the name of Harry Dillon, but we're going to refer to him as Dillon. He commented that Alice was beautiful. Jen went to university with Dillon, and he was best friends with one of her friends. Dillon was described to Jen as a nice guy. Dillon was currently on tour in Afghanistan. He was a soldier serving with the two Scots based in Edinburgh. Originally from India, Dillon had moved to Edinburgh in 2010, where he attended the Queen Margaret University. This was around the same time he applied to join the army. Once he had graduated from university, Dillon went straight on to join the army. In the army, he is known as Lance Corporal Trimon Dillon. October the 11th, 2015. Dillon sent a message to Jen wanting to know Alice. Jen had passed on the message to her friend. Alice and Dillon became friends on Facebook. They began messaging each other while Alice was still in Sri Lanka. Jen recalls Alice speaking to Dillon on several occasions. This would continue when Alice returned home from her holiday. Dylan was kind, funny, and charming throughout his messages. Alice couldn't wait to meet him. She would often send him care packages containing things like chocolate, magazines, and books. Anything that she thought he might like, she sent. Alice fully understood army life, as her sister was serving as an officer in the army. She confided in friends about her feelings towards Dylan. Within a month of speaking through text messages and Skype, they were officially in a relationship. And this was even before they had actually met in person. Although friends thought this was a little bit too soon, they saw how happy Alice was and they supported her. The 31st of October. Jen and Alice went on a mini trip with a few friends. They hired a cottage out where they would dress up and celebrate Halloween. But Alice seemed distracted on the trip. She was always on her phone. Dylan constantly messaged her. Jen said that Alice even moved furniture around so she could try and get a better signal near a window. If he couldn't get hold of Alice, he would message Jen, asking if Alice could borrow her phone so he could speak to her. Alice became overwhelmed and she broke down on the trip. December the 24th, Alice's birthday. Alice went to celebrate her birthday and Christmas with her family. This is where Clive and Sue learnt about Dylan. While she was supposed to be enjoying the day of celebrations, Alice's parents could see that she was upset. She was on her phone for most of the day talking to Dylan. What was supposed to be a phone call wishing her a happy birthday turned into Dylan going on about them having visitors where he was, and they were Victoria's Secret models visiting them. He tried to make Alice jealous. He kept going on and on about these models, stating how beautiful they was and how glad he was they were there. He didn't acknowledge Alice's birthday once. Dylan would constantly comment on Alice's appearance, pointing out things he necessarily didn't really like. He would make fun of her dress sense or her nose or her hairs on her arm. All these things that she was never insecure about until Dylan pointed them out. January 2016. Alice and Dylan met face to face for the first time. When he returned from his tour in Afghanistan, they spent 2 weeks together, 1 week in Edinburgh and the next week in Newcastle. Alice and Dylan seemed really happy together. Her work friends described her as being completely besotted with him. Jen said that Alice and a group of friends got together for a meal and Dylan joined them. They were all out sitting up the table and Jen was running a little late. When she arrived, Dylan just had to move along one chair so she could sit next to her boyfriend, but he flat out refused. And he actually did it in an aggressive way. This was the first time he was meeting all of Alice's friends. Jen said the atmosphere at the meal was just awkward. Dylan and Alice left shortly after the meal. Dylan would return to Afghanistan for a further 3 months. He told Alice that he was serving on the front line. This made Alice incredibly worried for his safety. But Alice's sister, who was serving as an officer herself, said, Dylan isn't nowhere near the front line. In fact, he's in a non-combat role in Afghanistan. Contact between the two became much more intense. Dylan would insist Alice would send him photographs of her at work to provide evidence of where she actually was. He was becoming more and more controlling, and Alice was becoming more withdrawn. She was quiet and nothing like her fun-loving self she once was. Dylan returned from his tour at the end of April and went to see Alice. Alice and a couple of her work colleagues attended a meeting in Edinburgh, and this meant Alice would stay overnight in a hotel. Dylan wouldn't stop texting Alice all night, and one of Alice's work colleagues told her to put her phone down and relax. Alice was getting more and more stressed, and each text that come in, the more stressed Alice got. So Alice decided to put her phone down and just try to relax, which she kind of did for a minute, until Dylan turned up at the hotel she was staying at, making everyone feel incredibly uncomfortable. Alice introduced Dylan to her parents on Bank Holiday Monday. Clive said Dylan said all the right things, and Clive was well aware of it as well. He was polite, but Alice looked really happy with him. But the following weekend, when they came around again, Dylan wasn't bothered about making a good impression this time. All he cared about was buying a car and spent most of his time looking on his phone at different cars. The only time he actually spoke to Clive or Sue was asking what car they preferred. Clive said Dylan ignored Alice for most of the day. When Alice was chatting with her mum, she let it slip that she'd fell out with Jen, and that Dylan said that Jen was toxic and to stay away from her. But in reality, this was the first time Jen and Alice had ever had an argument. But Dylan had other plans for Alice's friends. He slowly isolated Alice from her friends, including the ones she lived with. Alice shared a house with 3 other boys, and this didn't sit well with Dylan. It's believed that one day when Alice got home, she heard one of her housemates shouting about some girl, saying she was a effing bitch. Alice thought that her housemate was speaking about her, and she texted Dylan, saying that she was a bit worried. But Dylan then sent a message to the boy threatening him. This was the last thing Alice ever wanted. She just wanted to text her boyfriend and say that she was a bit worried. Her housemate explained to Alice that he wasn't talking about her at all. He was talking about one of his colleagues and he was really angry with her. It's not clear what Dylan said to the boy, but whatever it was really scared her housemate. This led to Alice moving out. Word got around at Alice's work that she was looking for somewhere to live. Within a couple of days, Alice had moved in with one of her work colleagues, Maxine. Maxine lived in Gateshead and she had a ground floor flat. This was perfect for the both of them, and they got on so well. Alice started acting like her old self again. But with Dylan never letting up with phone calls or texts or Skypes, things got too much for Alice, and Alice started to talk to Maxine about her relationship. Maxine said that Alice had lost weight, and her relationship was weighing down on Alice so badly. Maxine said to Alice that this was an abusive relationship, and she didn't have to put up with it at all. When Maxine met Dylan for the first time, she didn't like him. She said that he was trying too hard and he was arrogant. Then one day, when Alice was having a shower and washing her hair, Dylan insisted on Alice getting out of the shower straight away. He needed to use the toilet and he wasn't going to wait. He made her stand in the kitchen, soaking wet, with no clothes on, shampoo dripping in her eyes. And he didn't even give her a towel. Maxine found out about this and told Alice this was her flat too, and Dylan is no longer welcome in the flat. Alice was deflated, and she just said, "I know, I understand now." June 2016. Dylan had a firm grip still on Alice, and they went away with Alice's parents to Cornwall for a lovely family holiday. Sue and Clive said Alice was not herself on that holiday. Instead of being full of life and trying everything that she could find to do on holiday, she was quiet and just sat there. This wasn't like Alice at all. Alice's parents tried to find out what was wrong with Alice, but every time they tried to talk to her, Dylan was right next to her and not leaving her side. Sue later stated that looking back on the situation, she understood Dylan was doing this on purpose. Sue and Clive was just a really lovely family unit, and they were kind and caring people, and they thought that once Alice was back home and Dylan wasn't there, they were going to have a chat with her to see what was going on after the holiday. Alice was contacted by a lady on social media. She said that Dylan had met her through a dating website called Tinder, and he was trying to form a relationship with her. It turned out Dylan had been cheating on Alice the whole time they were together. This was it for Alice, the final straw. She no longer trusted Dylan. By August 2016, Alice had ended the relationship with Dylan. Dylan refused to accept this and said these must have been fake accounts because he's done nothing wrong at all. The lady who contacted Alice said that Dylan had invited her to attend a military ball, which Dylan actually invited Alice to, and she was really looking forward to going. He refused to let Alice go, but she said that a relationship was finished and she no longer wanted to be a part of his life. But things started to become nasty. Dylan threatened Alice with photos he had of her on his phone. He said that he would post them to her social media page if she didn't get back with him. But Alice refused. She didn't want to be with him anymore. But this wasn't what Dylan wanted. He called and texted Alice all day long, but Alice started to ignore his calls. He would then bombard her phone with text messages, saying how much he missed her and how much he loved her, that he couldn't breathe if she wasn't with him. He was very manipulative, trying everything he could to make her feel bad about leaving him. And he even said that he was going to kill himself if she didn't get back with him. Alice didn't reply to any messages. Dylan even tried to text Alice's mum and get her on side. He said that Alice was being really mean and treating him really badly, and said that it was in fact Dylan's mate told Dylan to create a fake Facebook account, and this would make Alice jealous. And he tried everything he could to point this out, that wasn't his fault. But Sue said, "What do you expect me to do about it?" Alice believed he had hacked into her Facebook, emails, and other social medias. He would make comments like he could see who she was messaging, and he would regularly say things that he shouldn't even know about. And on the 5th of August 2016, Alice raised concerns with her sister via text messages about Dylan trying to access her social medias and email accounts. Alice said that she had proof that he was hacking her stuff and that Dylan's behaviour was causing her to become tense and feel completely uneasy. It's believed that on the 10th of August, Dylan sent Alice a picture of another woman, stating that he's moved on now and he'll leave her alone. But yet in the same breath, he changed her Facebook details so she couldn't log in. Alice went to her brother and told him that she couldn't get onto her Facebook. This was really scary for Alice. She would end up deleting her account and creating a new one. She also asked her colleagues at work if they would help her put extra security in place on her Facebook, on her mobile phone, and on her emails. Alice now felt a little bit more secure, but she needed a break. So in September 2016, she went to visit her sister in Germany, where her sister was serving in the army. Alice would meet one of her sister's friends called Mike. He was so nice. He was just what Alice needed. She was getting back to her old self again, away from Dylan. It was like Alice could finally breathe again. Alice and Mike would stay in contact through WhatsApp. Dylan found out Alice was talking to Mike. Alice decided that she was going to block Dylan on everything she could think of. But Dylan could still read her messages. He even messaged Mike saying that Alice was already in a relationship and she was cheating on him by messaging him. But Mike didn't pay any attention to Dylan at all. And even though Mike and Alice's relationship was going well, Dylan didn't stop. He would continue to harass and stalk Alice. Alice's sister said that Alice's appearance had completely changed from how she used to look. Every day, Alice would receive about 7 new Facebook friends requests, all the time, every day. Alice knew it was Dylan. She was terrified by him. He just wouldn't let up. He refused to leave her alone. September the 24th, 2016, at 1:58 p.m, Alice called the 101 non-emergency number for the Northumbria police, and according to the police records, Alice was put on hold for 6 minutes and 43 seconds before she abandoned the call. Alice had not even been able to speak to a call handler. She messaged her sister saying that 101 number was really busy and she'd call back later. The 30th September, Dylan had turned up at Alice's door. He'd been knocking on the front door and then hiding, and he did this several times. He then went round the back garden, where he climbed over the fence and banged on Alice's bedroom window. As Alice looked through the window, she saw Dylan standing there with chocolates and flowers in his hand. He then backed away and put his arms up to say, "It's okay, I'm now going." And then he left. Dylan had made a 5-hour round trip from Edinburgh to Gateshead. October the 1st. Alice received a voice message from Dylan. She didn't reply to it. The voice message said, "I don't want to kill you. I wouldn't ever kill you. I don't know why you'd think I would kill you. I would never kill you." Alice called the police via the 101 non-emergency number. Alice explained to the call handler that she just needed a little bit of advice because she'd split up from her boyfriend, and he'd been outside her property that evening from 5 p.m. She said that he previously hacked her Facebook, her phone, and her emails, and even though she'd blocked him, he still managed to create different accounts and email her any way he could find. She said that he continued to message her all the time, and then he was in her garden, knocking on her window, leaving her chocolates and flowers from outside. Then he left her a voicemail saying that he wasn't going to kill her and he'd never kill her. And she concluded to say that she was a bit shaken up and she just wanted some help. The call handler gave Alice two choices. The first one was to contact a solicitor and get an injunction out. And the second one was to obtain a PIN, which, if the perpetrator would contact her, then he would be arrested. Alice chose the PIN. Dylan was served his PIN notice at his army barracks, warning him that if he ever contacted Alice again, he'd be arrested. 4 days later, Dylan had sent Alice a parcel containing a letter and some photographs of them together. Alice called the police straight away and said that he was in breach of his PIN. But the police did nothing. In fact, the call handler made out to Alice that she was wasting their time. And even though Dylan had in fact broke his terms of his PIN, because he did not threaten Alice, the call handler just marked Alice down as vulnerable. However, later that day, a police officer did call Alice. They went through her options. He asked if Alice wanted Dylan arrested, but this would ruin his career and his life. Alice didn't want to ruin anything. She just wanted to be left alone. And she said no, she didn't want him arrested. So the police officer said that anything that Dylan sent her to keep as evidence. Sue told her daughter to ignore him and he'll go away, because she really believed this. But Emma told her mum that that was the worst thing to tell Alice, because he would kill her, and that's what stalkers do. Sue then realised how serious this really was. Over the next few days, Dylan would contact Sue again, trying to get in contact with Alice. On the 12th of October after work, Alice was seen on CCTV around 5 p.m. One of Alice's work colleagues offered to give her a lift home, and he dropped her off at 5:31 p.m. Alice was seen on a dash cam getting out of the car. Alice had been chatting with friends online and trying on dresses. She also messaged Mike, but all contact stopped at 6 p.m. Around 1 hour later, Maxine popped home to grab her phone. She was then going to stay around her boyfriend's, but she thought she'd just pop back, grab her phone, and then go. But she couldn't get in her front door. It was triple locked. Maxine had a really strange feeling that something just wasn't right. So she went round the back, climbed over the fence, and saw the window was wide open. Maxine climbed through the window. She went into her bedroom, got her phone, and thought that if she couldn't get hold of Alice, she would call her. As Maxine walked past the bathroom door, there was blood everywhere. Maxine called 999.
Please, I've just come back to my flat and the door was locked, so I crawled through the window and my flatmate's covered in blood in the bathroom. Is she breathing? I don't know. I can't look. I'm sorry. Okay, try and stay calm. Try and stay calm. What's your address? It's Rolling Road. Is she covered in blood, did you say? Yes. Okay, bear with us 2 seconds. Alice! 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 Oh my God, she's dead. She's dead. Oh. Which town are you in? It's Gateshead. What's your name? Maxine.
The ambulance came, but it was too late. Alice had died. Forensics gets to work at the flat. And thanks to Maxine, she gave the call handler Dylan's name. Dylan was picked up later that evening by police. Dylan was arrested on the suspicion of Alice's murder. He tried to act like he didn't know what was going on by saying, "Are you trying to tell me that Alice is dead?" Police had taken Dylan's car in for forensic testing. Also, they had his wristband, which was a Help the Heroes wristband. Dylan had 2 large scratches on his face. Clive and Sue were asleep in their bed. It was around 2 a.m. when the dogs started barking really loudly, and they didn't stop. Clive got up to see what all the fuss was about. He opened the door and saw 2 officers standing there, asking if they could come in for a minute. They asked Clive to go get Sue downstairs, and then they broke the devastating news. Their 24-year-old daughter, Alice, had been murdered. The police said that someone had been arrested for the murder of Alice, and Clive said, "Is it Dylan?" The officers then replied, "That is the person's name we have arrested." The police officers left. Sue and Clive sat there in shock. They didn't know what to do. They were heartbroken. So they decided to get in their car and go drive to their children's house and family and break the news to them what happened to Alice, as they didn't want them finding out by someone else in the morning. Meanwhile, at the police station, Dylan had been questioned. He insisted that he never went to the flat. He didn't ever go inside the flat, he said. He went outside and he left flowers and chocolates for Alice, and then Alice grabbed his arm, and this is where she scratched his face. But he never entered the property. Alice's phone was missing from the crime scene, and the police searched CCTV and dash cams. Dylan was seen at the crime scene. His white BMW car was seen on CCTV parked up down the road at the same time as when Alice was dropped off from work by a colleague. 14 minutes later, Dylan was seen again on CCTV driving towards Alice's flat. He then parked his car up. Then, not long afterwards, Dylan was seen leaving Alice's flat. Then Maxine was then seen on CCTV going into her flat, where she discovered Alice in the bathroom. Because Alice's phone was missing, the police had traced her phone records and saw that her signal was going in the same direction as Dylan was driving. Dylan was very relaxed in the interview room being questioned until the police challenged him about Alice's phone being traced in the same direction as him. Dylan would answer every question now with no comment. The police charged Dylan with the murder of Alice Ruggles. April 2017. Dylan appeared in court. Alice's family was in court to hear Alice's last moments. 2 days before Alice was murdered, Dylan had drove all the way from Edinburgh to Gateshead to go outside Alice's bedroom window and take a photograph of her window. On the day Alice was murdered, Dylan had climbed through the window. He then saw Alice in the bathroom. He then went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife. Alice then saw Dylan and locked herself in the bathroom. Dylan kicked the door in. Alice tried to defend herself, but Dylan overpowered her and she ended up on the floor. Her head was leaning back on the shower tray, and this is where he cut Alice's throat from ear to ear. Alice had defense wounds on her hands. The knife injured underneath Alice's nose as well. There's also bruising on Alice's back, which consisted of Alice being pinned down. There was also 6 deep cuts to Alice's throat, cutting so deep it hit her spinal cords. The post-mortem results revealed that Alice had suffered 24 separate injuries, including defense wounds, large fatal wounds to her throat. Alice's blood was found on Dylan's Help the Heroes wristband and also on the steering wheel of his car. Dylan then left the crime scene, leaving Alice to bleed out on the bathroom floor. The whole time Dylan was on trial, he didn't show one bit of remorse. In fact, he was overconfident and arrogant. Dylan's previous girlfriend. In Alice's court case, they heard how a restraining order had been taken out against Dylan by his ex-girlfriend in Kent. This was 3 years earlier, and this was because she had split up with him. He had tracked her down and then spat in her face in the street. Now, when Alice was talking to Northumbrian police, they had no knowledge about this restraining order. If they did have, they may have acted differently. The judge said, "You pinned her down, probably by kneeling on her back. You slashed her throat with a knife, slashed it 6 times. The judge go on to say, Not a shed of remorse you have shown from the first to the last. Indeed, you were concentrating so hard about getting your story straight by giving evidence that you actually forgot to shed a crocodile tear. You were harassing her, you were stalking her, you were destroying her. Dylan was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 22 years. Outside the court, Alice's parents said, "We believe there are important lessons to be learned from what happened to Alice. We didn't think that she was the sort of girl that something like this would happen to. We welcomed him into our home and he came across as a normal person. Unfortunately, he was cruel, manipulative, and a bully who made Alice miserable and took her away from us. With hindsight, there are many signs of stalking and cohesive behaviours, and we did not recognise them. Everybody should know about these signs." A Northumbrian police officer contacted Dylan's barracks in Edinburgh and spoke to a superior of the soldier, who had a history of offences against ex-partners, but the Royal Military Police and the Police of Scotland were not informed. The Alice Ruggles Trust exists to raise awareness of stalking, including cohesive controlling behaviour. Please do not suffer in silence. If you are going through domestic violence or stalking, please report it to the police or a friend and they can report it. Please do not suffer in silence. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I will be back next week. I hope you all have a safe and happy week ahead of you. Goodbye.